maybe mom and dad deposited the $35,000 into the RSP. If you have the RSP room, then you can use that as the withdrawal against for your down payment. You get the instant tax refund of the $35,000, and then you can qualify for the first-time home buyers program. Hey guys, how's it going? Russell Westcott here. So fun upcoming video here that I shot with my business partner, Jason Mattern, and it started off with just a simple question that Jason had asked me. Simple question, but we dove into a really complex answer. And the question is, Russ, what would be the first type of property somebody should buy? What is the type of property somebody should buy? And I gave a very unconventional answer for this one. We talked a lot about in this video upcoming about house hacking, living for free. What type of property should you buy first? Whether you're a veteran investor or you're just getting started, there is a tremendous amount of wisdom and insight in this video upcoming. Let's go.
Hey, Russ, I got a great question for you. And this is one that we probably hear a ton of times on this side, but you know what? I'm going to throw one back at the coach this time. So
are we calling the show the kid and the coach or something? Is that what we're calling it?
Well, probably more like Mutt and Jeff, but let me lob a softball your way and see, and get your opinion on this, because I know a lot of people that are probably listening or watching, are sitting in this exact circumstance right now, wondering which course of action to take.
Yep.
So if you were to buy your very first property, what type of property would you buy? What property would you buy in general?
Okay, so let's put a quick premise on that question, is that it is the first property, right? So here's what I would actually suggest. I suggest, because we live in Canada, and I know there's going to be a worldwide audience that will watch this, I would highly encourage people to buy their first principal residence first. Because in Canada, we have this wonderful thing as a tax-free gain on the capital gains of our principal residence. I think you should buy your first house, the best house you can afford to live in, and go forward, and buy a principal residence. Now, here's the cool thing, and let's get into it. You and I are going to riff off this, and we actually have a real-life case study that we're working with a young fellow on this right now. I think you can have your cake and eat it too, where you potentially could buy a principal residence, house with a suite. If you were single, you could live in the suite and you could rent the upstairs out, and you could get into this principal residence for 5-10% down payment, CMHC insured mortgage. Banks love lending to homeowners at the same time. Part of the rent that's going to be generated from the upstairs will go towards the qualification, a little bit of your mortgage qualification. And then you could have both a rental property and a principal residence all at the same time. That would be my first recommendation, is you should look to buy your first principal residence first.
So Russ, let's back up on that a little bit. You said the income from the upper suite qualifying or helping the person qualify for the mortgage. So we're assuming that you're talking about a home with a secondary suite in it.
Correct.
And can you elaborate a little bit on the income portion that you're going to get and how that person can use that to help them qualify for that bigger, better property right up front?
Yeah, so each bank has a little bit of a different rule, and unfortunately, I'm not a mortgage broker. I don't know all of them, but I'll give some general terms. For example, I know some lenders will give 50% rental offset if you rent out, say, your upstairs. Say you live in the basement, and if you rent upstairs at, say, $1,800, you would get $900 that would credit towards your income qualification of that. So they would take all your job letters, all your other sources of income, whether you're getting down payment from mom and dad, all those kind of things, whether mom and dad is co-signing, and they would add $900 a month from the income from the upstairs, and that might actually tip you over the edge to be able to buy a house with a suite in it.
Absolutely. Now, even I guess another question that would probably come up on that I'll ask you is, we all know what a DCR is, a debt coverage ratio. If you are buying a personal residence, is a lender going to be looking at the DCR of the actual rental investment, or is this something that is going to be a what we would call a high ratio mortgage or CMHC insured mortgage, and that stuff could potentially all fly underneath the radar?
Well, bottom line is banks all have their individual rules. But here's the thing is, when they look at you differently when you're saying, I'm buying it for my personal residence. In Canada, homeowners typically pay their mortgages, right? And it's one of the easiest mortgages for a mortgage broker to get. It's one of the most friendly because they know the default rate on a homeowner in Canada is next to zero, right? And you potentially could get into it for next to, for like I said, a 10% down payment or less in some cases, depending on your strength. Now, here's another thing, and and we'll get into this case study of this young fellow that we were both had conversations with, and he's probably getting really close to pulling the trigger in the next little while. We're not sure, but here's the thing that I also would challenge somebody: if you are if this is truly your first purchase, take a look at the home buyers program put out by. Is it CMHC, or it's either CMHC or CRA that puts it out? But if you Google home buyers program, which states that you can potentially take up to, I believe, $35,000 out of your RSP to be used as a down payment towards a principal residence, your first principal residence, right? The first time home buyer program. Okay. That could be potentially your down payment. Maybe you have some RSPs sitting there that you could pull out tax, without paying tax, use that as your down payment. Or here's the other thing that I shared with some people at the same time. I'm getting a little bit on the skinny branches here with the strategy, but follow me out with this. Let's say down payment is coming from mom and dad. Let's say that's where it's coming from. I think that's awesome. Maybe this is a way, if mom and dad is watching this, this is maybe a way of getting Junior out of the house sooner rather than later. Maybe mom and dad deposited the $35,000 into the RSP. If you have the RSP room, then you can use that as the withdrawal against for your down payment. You get the instant tax refund of the $35,000, and then you can qualify for the first time home buyers program in Canada at the same time. So truly, you can eat your cake, have your cake and eat it too, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll throw a name out there, Andrew. If you're watching or listening, we're talking about and this is the live example, that we're talking about is a young fellow that he doesn't have a family yet. So this is the prime example for him to be able to move into this type of circumstance, and he can live in a secondary suite, no problem. He doesn't need any more space than that. And in the live example of putting only 5% down payment, he can almost live for free in building number one. He's going to be short about $300 to $400 a month, but there's going to be, I guess the upside on that is after he would leave and maybe move into an additional property in the next year or two, that property, by renting both suites, even at 5% down, would be in a positive cash flow situation. Now, what this young gentleman's talking to doing is he's looking at buying two of them, and let's just use a side-by-side duplex building as an example, to where we've got 4 rental units up and down, and he's living in one side of them, and he's putting 5% on the first one and 20% down on the second one. And in the whole grand scheme of things in that one building, he's going to live for free and still be over $400 a month positive cash flow after expenses. Wow. After, if he would move on and turn that into a full-time rental product, he's still going to be over $800 a month positive cash flow. So, Russ, maybe there's some links in after the video that we can put in to maybe steer people into this program with CRA, or look into it if you've got the ability, when you're a single person or a couple, to live in a lower secondary suite. Even if you were living in the main suite and renting out the secondary suite, it's still going to be beneficial, right?
Yep.
And after the fact, if this is, they move on and move into another property in a year or two as the family grows or whenever that time is, even at today's interest rates, and like I say, at the lower down payment, the property with the secondary suite will still be in a positive cash flow situation, even with that low down payment. And You know what? We're all real estate investors. If you look at the ROI, of course, anytime you're putting less money into it, the ROI goes through the roof.
Yeah. So I guess a succinct answer to your question is, what would be the first type of property you buy? I don't concern myself typically of the type. What I would actually concern myself more of, is there a possibility that I can live in it and rent part of it out if it's my first home? and help offset all my costs. So essentially, I guess that's a fancy way. People are talking about house hacking and all that kind of stuff. Essentially, that's the way I bought my first rental property. Now, I'm going to contradict my advice here. That's how I bought my first personal residence. I'm going to contradict my advice. I bought 10 rental properties before I bought my first principal residence. Now, if I was to look at it again, I probably should have bought that first principal residence first. That's the advice I would give myself, 20 years ago. And what I did was I found somebody who was a contractor, owned a painting company, had all the trades. We found a house in Coquitlam. It had a basement suite in it and had a spot for a second basement suite that could be put into it. Okay. So we bought the place. I qualified as a first-time home buyer, right? So I took money from my RSPs out as a first-time home buyer. I think we got in with 5% down, the two of us together. The other partner did all the work. Right? They did all that work. They put in the second suite. They used all their trades. They used all their people. And after we were done, we essentially lived upstairs and we had 2 suites in the basement. And we were living for under $300 a month is what our costs were to own that place. We bought the place for, I'm probably going to stretch myself in the numbers here a bit. Well, we bought the place for $360 after we put in 40 into it. So we're into it for $400. When I exited out at 7 and change. And I know my partner who bought me out exited out at 1.4 million. So, oops. Probably should have found a way to hang on to that a little longer, AJ.
Well, I was
but here's the point. Here's the thing I'm trying to get to, guys. I got into that with like a 5% down payment pulled from my RSPs as a first-time home buyer. I only paid $300 a month in rent, and I doubled my investment within like 3 or 4 years. And the reason why I moved out is because I fell in love with an amazing woman, and we decided to go get our own place. And she didn't want to move in with a roommate for some reason, Jay.
Go figure, yeah. Go figure. So listen, Russ, I guess just to clarify on that for people listening and watching, the personal residence that you bought was a personal residence the financing was structured as a personal residence.
100%.
But if I'm reading between the lines, you have, had, I guess, the intent of having secondary income from that, from an additional suite, and knew this was a transition for you, that you would be moving, in a year or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever that timeline was. And then that property was going to become an investment property for you.
100%. That was my intention. Right.
Yeah. Because I think, just to clarify the question of buying a personal residence, if you're going out and buying a personal residence without a secondary suite or that income stream, I think I would probably have to maybe, fire back at you a little bit, because I know just from experience that if people are buying a personal residence, and say it's their dream home before investment, that can hamper their mortgageability. And people ask that all the time too. And we see people doing that. People need to live in a house. However, the fact that you bought 10 investment properties first before buying your personal residence in today's lending environment would probably be advantage investor. But I think the strategy that we're trying to bring forth today is that if you have the ability to take advantage of the financing structure of a personal residence with a secondary suite, this is where we're targeting.
Yeah. Now 100% times were a little different back then, and we're going to go back into the way back time machine here a little bit. The reason why on my 11th property, I decided to get a principal residence, because my mortgage broker at the time was taking a look at my portfolio review and said, Russ, I think it's time to buy a personal residence, because banks like people with personal residence better than renters of basement suites at the time. And I said, makes sense. So can I still qualify for a first-time home buyer even though I've bought 10 places? And he said, yeah, have you lived in anything? Have you deemed any of them as a personal residence? And I said, nope. Okay, there you go. And I qualified for a first-time home buyer at that time. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, guys are saying, well, maybe you're skirting the issue here. You had an intention as a revenue property. I lived in it. I lived in it for almost 3 years. So I moved in. We're not talking about you just buying a personal residence. I put my sleeping bag in it, and then I'm going to the next day, I'm going to move out and rent out everything. Guys, do it above board here, please. If you say it's going to be your principal residence, do move in. But I think there's a wonderful opportunity for somebody maybe getting started, maybe young, single. Jay talked about buying one of those side-by-sides with suites. Essentially, you got 4 rental units. You live in one, rent the other 3 out. You're not only getting positive cash flow, you're living for free. I think that's an absolute no-brainer. And guys, if you are in that boat and you're young and you're buying your first place, you may be making a presentation to mom and dad, maybe to help you qualify or maybe come up with some down payment. Maybe you're making a joint venture presentation to mom and dad to help you be able to do this kind of a transaction. All right, guys. So if you are interested in taking some next steps, wherever you're watching this, down below, there will be some links if you are interested in taking the next step forward. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Hey, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. If you are interested in moving forward with velocity, if you're interested in being a successful real estate investor, only 2 simple next steps from here. Number 1, below where you're watching this, there will be an opportunity for you to subscribe. And over here will be a hand-selected video for you to keep moving forward. Continue your journey forward. Just click on over here for that hand-selected video for you, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you very much.